Welcome aboard with Lady Justice, Liberty Press, Season
Hey
7.
everyone, today we are diving into a really interesting legal puzzle. How can a simple local robbery end up as a major federal case, complete with a possible 20-year prison sentence? It's a question that tells us a whole lot about the incredible reach of federal power.
I mean, really think about it for a second. A stick-up at a corner store, some local shakedown, that stuff feels like a job for the local cops, right? So how and why do the FBI and federal prosecutors suddenly get involved? Well, the answer isn't really about the crime itself. It's about the ripple effect that crime has on our national economy. And the key to unlocking this whole thing is a surprisingly powerful law that's been on the books for over 75 years. Okay, let's get into it. Section 1. How exactly does a local crime go federal? We're going to look at the law that makes it all possible, the HOBBS Act. So here's the heart of it. The HOBBS Act goes after robbery and extortion, but there's a huge twist. It lets the federal government step in if the crime affects interstate commerce. And pay close attention to that phrase, in any way or degree, because that, right there, is the key that unlocks an absolutely immense amount of federal power.
All right, Section 2, the HOBBS Act, explained. Let's really break down the nitty-gritty of this law.
The wording here is so important. Notice, the law doesn't just say it's illegal to stop commerce. It applies to anything that obstructs, delays, or affects it, even in the absolute smallest way. This super broad language was put there on purpose. Now, what's interesting is that the HOBBS Act doesn't just invent new crimes out of thin air. Instead, it takes two classic, old-school crimes and gives them a massive federal upgrade. Those two crimes are robbery and extortion. First up, we've got robbery, and the definition is pretty much exactly what you'd think it is: taking something that's not yours from someone by using force or threatening to use force. It's your classic stick-up scenario.
And then you have extortion. This one's a little different. It's when someone gives you their property, but only because you've used threats or fear to make them do it. You know, think of a shakedown or a protection racket. This part of the law also gets used all the time by prosecutors to go after public corruption cases.
Okay, on to Section 3, the Affects Commerce Clause. So we've got robbery and extortion, but what's the secret sauce that turns them into federal crimes? It all comes down to how the law defines commerce. So what does commerce even mean here? Well, the law defines it in the broadest way possible. We're talking about business happening in Washington, D.C., any trade that crosses a state line, and even trade happening inside a single state if the product somehow passed through another state to get there. It creates this absolutely massive net. And this whole gigantic legal framework, it's all built on the Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution. That's the part that gives Congress the power to regulate business among the states. And the HOBBS Act, that's Congress flexing that constitutional muscle as hard as it possibly can. You know, the HOBBS Act isn't some kind of lone wolf either. Congress uses this Commerce Clause power for all sorts of things. They use it to federalize crimes like arson if the building that was burned was used in interstate trade. Or get this, they can even use it to prosecute someone for using a phone or the mail to plan a riot across state lines. It's an incredibly powerful and versatile tool for federal law enforcement. All right, Section 4. Now, if you thought the law itself was broad, just wait until you see how the courts have interpreted it. The judicial branch has taken this already powerful statute and basically put it on steroids. So the courts have interpreted that affects commerce part very, very generously. First, they say in any way or degree means just that. Only a tiny, minimal effect is needed. Second, prosecutors don't even have to prove there was an effect, just that there was a realistic probability of one. But the most powerful tool of all, the real game changer, is this last one, the depletion of assets theory.
So here's how that works, and it's kind of wild. Let's say you rob a local pizza shop. Seems totally local, right? But what if that shop buys its cheese from Wisconsin and its flour from Kansas? By robbing the shop, you've depleted its assets. You took money that could have been used to buy more cheese or flour from out of state. And just like that, boom, you've now affected interstate commerce, and that local robbery is a potential federal case.
So at this point, you're probably thinking, this seems almost limitless. Are there any limits to this power? And for the most part, yeah, it's incredibly broad. But the Supreme Court has drawn at least one very important line in the sand. It's called the Edmonds exception. In a case called United States versus Edmonds, the court said the Hobbs Act was not meant to police violence during a legitimate labor strike for higher wages. They argued that trying to get higher pay for actual work isn't wrongful in the way the law intended. Now, and this is a really big but, it absolutely still applies to extortion for personal payoffs or demanding payment for fake no-show jobs.
Now, the biggest constitutional challenge to this idea came in 1995 with the landmark case U.S. v. Lopez. In that case, the Supreme Court struck down a federal law banning guns near schools, saying it had nothing to do with commerce. So naturally, people wondered if the Hobbs Act also went too far. But the court said no. The thinking was that robbery and extortion are, at their very core, economic crimes. They directly impact commerce in a way that just possessing a gun doesn't.
So let's bring it all home. Section 5. Why does this federal power matter so much? What's the big takeaway here? Well, first and foremost, the stakes are just incredibly high. A conviction under the Hobbs Act carries a maximum federal prison sentence of 20 years. That gives federal prosecutors a tremendous amount of leverage.
The big takeaway is this. Because of the super broad language in the Hobbs Act and the even broader way the courts interpret it, that line between local and federal crime can become vanishingly thin. The federal government's reach into what we usually think of as state and local police matters is just vast.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. The Supreme Court itself put it this way. The Hobbs Act invokes the fullest extent of Congress's power under the Commerce Clause. I mean, it doesn't get much clearer than that. Which leaves us with one final and pretty provocative question. If robbing almost any business can be seen as an act that disrupts the national economy, what are the true limits of federal power? It really makes you think about the balance of power between the federal government and the states. Something to chew on. Thanks for watching.
Have you heard the word? thepolicerecord.com/invite/LJLP. Get you some discountage over there at thepolicerecord.com. Hope to see you there.
I think one of those ones good.
I messed up, sorry.
I think one of them is good. I think we're good. You want to do it again?
All
right. Okay. I'm not going to say 3. I'm going to say 1, I'm going to say 2, and then we're going to start. Okay. 1.
Keebler Ai music.
Beneath the city lights, you stand so strong, a silent guardian, where the rights belong. Through the crowd you see the truth unfold, your heart beats steady, your hands are bold, in the silence, in the pain.